You think you can repeat word for word straight to my face? Lennart Nierman stood with a heavy frown etched on his face. The man in front of him, taller than the German by at least a head, took off his own sunglasses and growled menacingly. Get the FCK out of my way. Lennart Nierman immediately recognized who this burly man was, and his expression hardened like a rock right there, and then he hesitated before opening his mouth. Please, go ahead first. Thomas Andre used his wide shoulders to brush past the German hunter and stepped into immigration control. The act of apologizing was the job reserved for Laura, following him from close behind. What a giant he was! It was not for nothing that people attached the nickname of Goliath to him. Thomas Andre discovered the face of the immigration officer rapidly turning pale, and put the sunglasses back on before forming a genial smile. Is this Mr. Seong's country? Within the Jin Guild office, for Yu Jin-ho, this office had become far more comfortable than his own place. But right this moment, it felt as if every passing minute was as agonizingly long as an hour. He sneaked a glance at the clock hanging on the wall. It said 16:10 p.m. It had been over 2 hours since that man had shown up here. Gulp. Worried that his unconscious saliva swallowing had made too much noise, Yu Jin-ho quickly sneaked a glance at the unannounced guest to the side. Unfortunately, his gaze ended up meeting the guest's eyes hidden behind a pair of sunglasses. The big man replied with a refreshing grin. Yu Jin-ho forced his stiff facial muscles to form a grin of his own, or something that roughly resembled one, and hurriedly averted his gaze elsewhere. Thick sweat drops formed on his forehead. He then hurriedly pulled out his poor phone and tried to call his dear Hyung-nim, but it was a waste of time. It had been 2 days since the last communication with Hyung-nim. For some reason, he wasn't picking up his phone at all. Yu Jin-ho lowered his phone and closed his mouth real tightly. It was the same story for other employees of the guild. These talented individuals who chose to work for the Jin Guild after seeing its potential were all overwhelmed by this awkward atmosphere, and, as if they had made a promise to do so, resolutely maintained this heavy silence. Of course, none of this was their fault. No, anyone who found themselves in a similar situation would react in the same manner. Especially so when the man sitting on a chair by the corner of the office happened to be one of the most powerful hunters in the entire world, who also happened to be known as the man with one of the shortest fuse in the world. Not only that, the owner of this office was the very man who beat this hunter to a pulp and sent him to the hospital. So, how could anyone be able to smile and jovially chat amongst themselves in front of this man? He was, of course, Thomas Andre. The hunter standing on top of the world had come to visit Jin Guild to meet Jinwoo. The automated door to the guild slid open. The heads of every single employee, including Yu Jin-ho, instantly snapped in that direction. Right away, his eyes grew wide. Yu Jin-ho jumped up from his seat in sheer joy and spoke in a voice that contained the desperate pleading hearts of everyone working for this guild. I was wondering why there were so many reporters camping outside. But this. Jinwoo helplessly stared at Thomas Andre, grinning back at him. Looking at that expression, the American didn't seem to be hung up over what happened before. So what brought him all the way out here? Funnily enough, though, it was Yu Jin-ho who welcomed Jinwoo way before Thomas Andre could. Hyung-nim, why couldn't I get a hold of you for so long? Well, I was busy. Hang on a minute, now that I see your clothes. Yu Jin-ho faltered and stopped moving. Jinwoo's clothing bore countless pieces of evidence of the harsh battles he must have gone through. It was like looking at Hyung-nim after he concluded his giant monster hunting trip. If Hyung-nim was fighting non-stop, to the point he couldn't contact anyone for 2 days straight, then just how many monsters were sent back to hell by Hyung-nim's short swords? It was at this point in time that Thomas Andre stood up leisurely from the chair to walk up to Jinwoo. Since he was such a big dude, to begin with, he didn't need to take that many steps to close the distance between him and his target. Soon, the American stood before Jinwoo. Hang on. They aren't going to fight again in here, right? The guild employees were unaware of these two's current relationship, so understandably, they were busy swallowing nervous saliva as their eyes locked onto the two men standing before each other. The sounds of their racing hearts were so loud that Jinwoo's ears were actually aching right now from the noise assaulting him. Mr. Seong. Thomas Andre extended his hand first. Jinwoo grinned and held the offered hand to shake it. What brings you to Korea? Oh, that. Thomas Andre recovered his wits and formed another smile. Didn't I promise you before? I told you that I'll buy a meal once my arm heals up. He raised his completely healed left arm and waved it around. And, also, Jinwoo sneaked a glance at the clock on the wall. It was almost 4:30 in the afternoon. The time was obviously too late for lunch, but it was also a bit too early for supper. Jinna killed her footsteps and sneaked like a crafty little cat to clothes in her mom busying washing dishes. Either mom didn't hear her daughter's footsteps, or maybe she did hear them but decided to pretend that she didn't. She didn't react to Jinna closing the distance. And then, in the end, Jinna got close enough to hear her mom's breathing before hugging her tightly. Mom, too bad for all of her efforts, though her mother didn't seem to be surprised at all. She simply responded with a gentle voice. Are you feeling bored? NG, I am. Appa doesn't want to come home, and mom doesn't want to play with me. While mom was sleeping in the hospital, Jinwoo performed the role of the substitute mother to his sister. To help Jinna focus on her studies, he did his best to act as the sole breadwinner and took care of all the chores around the family home. To her, he was her sibling, her parent, and at the same time, her friend. That was why Jinna often missed her Appa's presence around the family home as he grew busier and busier every day. Every single one of her fellow countrymen knew her Appa's face and his name by now, but what was the point if she couldn't really get to see him anymore? And so, here she was, trying to fill the hole Jinwoo had left behind with her mom and her warm words of encouragements. Jinna clung to her mom's back like a cicada holding onto a tree for a while before opening her mouth. Mom, let's move house. Mom's hands momentarily stopped moving before resuming their actions. A smile formed on her lips again. Do you want to move to somewhere else? Yeah. But what will we do? Mom really likes this place, you know. Why do you like such an old apartment? Jinna lightly rebuked her, but mom simply smiled back and her hands continued to move briskly. Actually, Jinna knew why her mom didn't want to leave this old apartment. She knew the reason why her mom still persisted in staying here while paying the monthly rent, when her Appa was making the kind of money that regular people would never get to touch in their lifetime. She was still waiting for her missing husband, her children's father. She was hoping that, maybe one day, he'd stumble back here. Jinna couldn't remember much about her father now and felt that waiting for him was a waste of time. But her brother hadn't mentioned moving house again after he heard mom's reasoning. Still, I like this apartment. Mom gently persuaded her daughter again, prompting Jinna to spin on her heels to leave, her cheeks puffing up unhappily. Mom quickly turned around and looked at Jinna with a face that said, I forgot. She had just remembered that the weather forecast warned of rainfall later in the evenings. Sweetie, can you take the washing from the veranda and bring them in? Mom, you only call me sweetie when you need me to do stuff. Still, she didn't mind being called that, as evidenced by her happy humming as she made her way to the veranda. As befitting of Jinna, who was more or less an expert at performing chores like this, she quickly took down the washings and placed them in the basket. But then, her rapid hands suddenly stuttered to a halt. She realized that the sky above had darkened even before she noticed it. Did the rain clouds arrive already? Naturally, she raised her head up to look above, and her eyes opened incredibly wide next. The basket filled with washed clothes fell out of her hands. Even though Seoul was infamous for its clogged roadways, such a traffic jam seemed improbable in the middle of a weekday. Did another gate pop up in the middle of the road again? The overall atmosphere of the road seemed far too suspicious for something as simple as that. In fact, all the drivers had stopped their cars and stepped outside to look up into the sky. It wasn't just the drivers, either. Even the pedestrians on the sidewalks, people on the zebra crossings, every single one had come to a dead stop and was looking up at the sky above their heads. Woo Jincheol dazedly stared at the sky before a look of pure, unadulterated shock took over his face. How can something like that be? Oh, Mr. Seong, you probably have no idea how long I waited for this moment. Thomas Andre welcomed Jinwoo into his hotel suite with open arms. It was true that you'd feel great about receiving gifts, but the joy of giving itself shouldn't be underestimated, as well. From the time Jinwoo mentioned that he needed new short swords to up until now, Thomas Andre had been counting the days he'd get to hand over the greatest weapons ever made, sleeping within his guild's storage, to his new friend. Thomas Andre snapped his fingers, prompting his bodyguards to bring out a large box covered in a sheet of fabric. Even if it was ostensibly a gift, Jinwoo didn't really want anything to begin with, so he stared at the box with disinterest. But then, as the bodyguards got closer and closer, his eyes became equally sharper and sharper as well. Something inside that box was resonating with his magical energy. Thomas Andre easily caught the changes in Jinwoo's expression and inwardly punched the air. That's what I'm talking about. Hunter Seong Jinwoo would recognize the weapons, while said weapons would recognize their new owner. Thomas Andre predicted that they would naturally recognize each other, and as expected, he was proven right at this moment. It was possible that these weapons had been hiding inside the Scavenger Guild's storage unit where not even a strand of outside light entered, biding their time just for this very moment. This here is my repayment for the favor you've shown to my guild members and to myself. Thomas Andre grasped the corner of the fabric and carefully pulled it away. The sheet slid off smoothly and revealed what it had been hiding all this time. Hang on, could they even be called short swords? Jinwoo grew doubtful almost immediately. The blades of these weapons were definitely shorter than a long swords, yes, but then again, they were so much longer than a regular short swords, too. However, what caught his attention wasn't the puzzling length of the short swords themselves. No, it was actually their ice-white blades. Jinwoo was familiar with the concept of crafting blades out of non-metallic materials. As a matter of fact, the very first weapon he acquired inside the first instant dungeon was the poison fang of Kasaka. Thanks to the memories of that time, Jinwoo could guess just which monster's fang was used as raw material to craft this pair of short swords. Besides, there was only one creature capable of emitting this kind of aura from a part of its remains. Kamish. Jinwoo involuntarily whispered that name out, prompting Thomas Andre to shake his head while clapping his hands, feeling impressed. To think, you'd correctly guess the base material used for these guys just from one look. Jinwoo's guess was correct. But then, because he was right, he became puzzled about something else. Hang on, I thought Kamish's remains were in safekeeping with the Hunter Bureau. Because the American government wanted the intact corpse, we gave up on that monster completely. We got something else even more valuable than money from that deal anyway. Thomas Andre recalled the raid back then and grinned meaningfully. However, Kamish's biggest and sharpest fang. When that thing tried to bite me, I yanked out one such fang, and it was given to me as a souvenir. The problem was, there were no awakened capable of crafting weapons out of stripped materials from a DMN dragon, besides one single man. That was. Thomas Andre added that, with the master craftsman responsible for the creation of these two genuine masterpieces having passed away due to old age, there would never be another weapon crafted out of the dragon corpse in this world again. The fang's length wasn't nearly long enough to make a proper longsword, so they were made into short swords back then. Who knew that decision would pay off now? Thomas Andre recounted the situation of all those years ago, his expression remaining bright and cheerful. And now, these are yours. Finally, the best weapons in the world had met the best owner in the world. Thomas Andre did his darndest to calm his fluttering heart, and studied Jinwoo's response. The latter pulled one of the short swords out. Chiwak. As if the weapon was waiting for it, it came off without any resistance whatsoever. The mechanical beep went off in Jinwoo's head as soon as he grasped the short sword, and he quickly swallowed his saliva. Shortly afterwards, the detailed explanations on the weapon popped up in his view. What? Jinwoo doubted his own eyes right away. This couldn't be real. He was completely taken aback by the nonsensical attack value of this weapon and hurriedly summoned out his current main weapon. The Demon King's Short Sword. Rarity S. Type Short Sword. Attack plus 220. A short sword taken from the Demon King. Baron. Using two Demon King's short swords will activate a set effect. Set effect 2 becomes 1. Extra attack power equal to the current strength stat will be added to each short sword. This blade's attack power would shoot way past the 500 mark when his current strength stat of over 300 was added on top. He had always thought that such a set effect would make this short sword plenty useful for his cause. But then, the attack value of the new short sword in his hand was. Jinwoo compared the stats for both short swords and began freaking out inwardly. How can this even be possible? Jinwoo's gaze was fixed to the short sword crafted out of Kamish's fang. Its utterly unbelievable attack power could be seen floating above the weapon. Rarity. Type Short Sword. Attack plus 1500. Top quality short sword fashioned from the sharpest fang among the dragon's teeth by the expert's hands. The blade's sharpness has no equal in this world. It also boasts excellent sensitivity towards mana, and can become greatly strengthened depending on the wielder's capability. The explanation seemed to go on forever. However, nothing besides the attack damage entered his eyes. 1500. Just the pure attack damage. Never mind any added options. Just the base damage dealt was 1500. After recalling that the higher attack damage would make it easier to slice up the enemy, Jinwoo couldn't even begin to imagine just how scarily effective this short sword was going to be. The most expensive broadsword's attack damage barely cracked past the 1000 mark. Even if this weapon was sold in the store, it was still a broadsword boasting 1000 damage. But a measly little short sword was 1500. Just purely from the perspective of the attack damage, won't it be the same thing as me wielding two broadswords in each of my hands? Whoa there, Mr. Seong. Even if I activate my reinforcement skill to increase my defense, that blade will still cut me down. I hope you ain't thinking of killing me with my own gift, right? Of course, Jinwoo wasn't thinking of doing that. He replied to Thomas Andre's odd exaggeration with a chuckle and focused back on the short sword. Thomas Andre had experienced all sorts of craziness in his life, but even he couldn't hold back his shocked gasp from leaking out of his mouth. From Jinwoo's hand, from the entirety of the short sword itself, a blackish aura was slowly rising up. That was why this short sword is. It's responding to my magic energy. Thomas Andre stopped looking at Jinwoo and shifted his gaze over to her. You still think I made a mistake? Thomas Andre's meaningful gaze prompted Laura to shake her head quickly. As long as these short swords were to be pointed in the direction of the monsters and not other humans, Thomas Andre's decision should be seen as irrefutable. The weapon would find its rightful owner. Even as a regular person who couldn't sense any magical energy, Laura understood what was going on here in an instant. So, how do you like my present, Mr. Seong? Is it really okay for me to receive something like this for free? What do you mean, for free? Thomas Andre erased that semi-permanent smile off his face and formed a serious expression next. Actually, I think it's a cheap price to pay.